Hello, everyone. Welcome to Your Bible Questions Answered. I'm looking forward to getting into the questions. There look like some great questions today. Wow. You guys keep raising the bar, like you keep making the questions harder, which, is just more fun, I suppose. I'll do my best to answer them as always. I just want to remind you that Passover is coming up. Really excited about that. We are going to be celebrating it April 15th at the Way Congregation. So if you can join us, please go to thewaycongregation.com and you will see a little thing at the banner at the top for instructions on how to get tickets to that. We try to keep it as affordable as possible, but we have some real costs, and so we have to share those costs. If money is an issue, come talk with us, and we'll sneak you in the back door. But if you can afford it, we do appreciate it, so we can just kind of cover all those costs. All right, let's get into the questions. I can't think of anything else important to say, so let's just jump right in. The first question is coming to us from Courtney Earl. She says in Genesis 25:8, when Abraham died, it says he died in a good old age and was gathered to his people. What does this mean? All right, Courtney, there's really two possible answers to this. One, you had the tradition, the cultural tradition, where you would put somebody in a tomb, their body would then decompose, and then you would go in later, maybe 3-4 years, I don't know, how many years later, and you would literally gather the bones together and kind of put them in the corner, and then you'd put the next guy in there, or woman, or whoever, and they would literally be gathered together. So that's one interpretation. That's a little more sort of archaeological interpretation, okay? And then the other one would be that he was gathered to his people. In other words, he was gathered to those who had died before him, not the dead people, but those living in the faith, and that they went all to the same place, namely, they went to Sheol, okay? They went to the grave. And of course, there is some question as to whether people are conscious or unconscious. I tend to lean toward the idea that they're unconscious. Now, I know that in Luke chapter 16, Jesus specifically talked about Abraham's bosom. I tend to interpret that as a parable, though I wouldn't die on that hill. But that's typically how I see that, is that Jesus was giving a parable. He was trying to make a point about the beliefs of the Pharisees versus actually teaching about everyone hanging out next to Abraham. Okay. So, but again, I could be wrong on that one. So a little tricky. So when we look at the life of Samuel, or the death of Samuel, right? Saul was able to raise him, but he was kind of upset about it, that he was disturbed from his sleep. We know that Daniel was told that he would sleep in the dust. So exactly where or what was happening, we're not entirely sure, but it would seem that Abraham was gathered to those who had died in the faith before him, and he was going to be with them. So I hope that helps. Okay. All right. Very good. Let's go on to Suzanne. She says, concerning Numbers 24:7, do you believe that should be translated as Gog instead of Agag, like the Septuagint suggests, and most rabbinic opinions suggest? Also, wouldn't you agree that all of Numbers 24 is messianic second coming prophecy? Agag doesn't make a lot of sense if talking about the last days. Am I wrong here, or am I on the right track? Very thankful for your expertise and judgment. Thank you, Doug, for all you do for all of us. Okay, thank you, Suzanne. I appreciate that. Let's take a look at Numbers 24. All right, let's open that up. Numbers 24:7. All right, so he shall pour. Let me make sure I'm sharing this with you guys. Hold on. I'm also the producer, so this is exciting. Okay, so he shall pour water from his buckets, and his seed shall be in many waters. His king shall be higher than Agag, and his kingdom shall be exalted. All right, so let's kind of zoom in here. Speaking of zooming in, I'm going to make that a lot bigger. All right. So here's the Hebrew word, me agag. All right. And when we take a look at this in the Septuagint, and let's see here. Here it is. The versification's off, sadly. So here you have the word Gog. All right. So yeah, that's how they decided to translate that or transliterate that. I have a whole section in Corrupting the Image, Volume 3 on the name Gog. And when I was considering this passage, I felt, in my scholarly opinion, I just felt that there wasn't solid linguistic evidence to really go with this. I can clearly see what the Septuagint is suggesting. And when I was writing the book, I just felt like it was, I didn't have enough to really latch onto to make a clear, definitive statement. So I really can't give you one here. So that's the problem. Now, your second question, is this talking about the second coming? Well, possibly. God brings him out of Egypt. He has strength like a wild ox. I mean, who is he talking about? Well, apparently he's talking about Israel, right? I mean, I think that this is what the whole prophecy here is about Israel. Whether that is about this second coming, I think you could make a case for it. I don't know that you could absolutely prove it. Now, certainly we have a messianic reference right here in verse 17, a star shall come out of Jacob. This is clearly talking about the Messiah, okay? So out of Jacob, one shall have dominion to destroy the remains of the city. Okay. And then he looked on Amalek and took up his oracle and said Amalek was the first among the nations. Okay, so he does throw something in there. I wouldn't say that the entire chapter is about the second coming, but it's certainly prophetic. It's talking about the Messiah and that this one coming out will have dominion. So that's really pretty much as far as I can go on that. I don't know that we would be justified in arguing that there's more. Okay, I'm not saying there couldn't be, but I don't know. I would be hard pressed on that. And as far as the word agag or gog, it was just really hard to make that decision. So I decided to not make that part of my discussion on the name Gog, since it's a little bit questionable. All right. Very good. Thank you for that great question, Suzanne. Let's go to Ken. He says, at the transfiguration, how did the disciples know that it was Moses and Elijah that appeared on the mountain with Jesus? Good question, Ken. Certainly they're not told specifically that it was those two individuals, right? But somehow they just knew. All right, so let's kind of let's do a little bit of background. Again, I talk about that scene a lot in this book right here, and also in this amazing book right here. So here's what's so interesting, but really in Corrupting Image 3, okay? If you have to decide between the two, I don't know, I'll get both, but I'd probably go with 3, okay? Because there I talk about the two witnesses, and it was the universal Jewish belief that Moses and Elijah would come back before, or would come back, at the time of Messiah. So here comes Messiah, right? In his first coming. And guess who shows up? So it's very possible that when they saw these two individuals, they were thinking, well, it's going to be Moses and Elijah. I mean, everybody knows that. So who else would show up with Moses and Elijah? I would suspect that's probably what was going through their minds. So rather than turning to some kind of a supernatural interpretation to begin with, I would say that they already had this cultural expectation that Moses and Elijah would come back with the Messiah. So that's probably number one. Now, number two is a lot more speculation, which is that perhaps, maybe, somehow in the spirit, because they were in this, supernatural experience, right? They were seeing Jesus transfigured. Here are two heavenly beings that show up. Could it be that somehow this energy, this power, this this knowledge just imparted something to them? Maybe, right? But it's highly speculative. So I would probably go with option number one, which is they were already expecting those two specifically to show up. And that is why I believe when the two witnesses come, they will either be those two, Moses and Elijah, or two that come very much in the power and spirit of Moses and Elijah, which I would say just it's Moses and Elijah. Okay. So yeah, that would be my take on that, Ken. So very cool question. All right, this is a question from Jamie. Shalom, Pastor Doug. In Revelation 8:1, it says that when the seventh seal was opened, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. Do you have any insight on the significance of the silence and the time of half an hour? Jamie, my friend John Haller says that the half an hour of silence in heaven was giving everyone time to update their charts, which I think is a great response. It's pretty funny. So here's the thing. Let's take a look at that passage, because that will hopefully give us a little more insight. All right, so let's take a look there. Revelation 8. All right, when he opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. And I saw the seven trumpets who stand before God, and to them were given seven trumpets. Then another angel, having a golden censer, came and stood at the altar. He was given much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of all the saints upon the golden altar which was before the throne. All right, so let me back up just a little bit. Where are we? We've had the six seals, right? When we get to the end of the sixth seal, look what's going on. In the sixth seal, check this out. All right. And when he opened the sixth seal, there was a great earthquake. The sun and moon became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became like blood. So within the sixth seal, these things are happening. Also in there, the stars of heaven fell to the earth as a fig tree drops its late figs when it's shaken by a mighty wind. The sky recedes as a scroll when it's rolled up, and every mountain and island is moved out of its place. And then in the time of the sixth seal, the kings of the earth, the great men, the rich men, the commanders, the mighty men, every slave and every free man hid themselves in the caves and in the rocks of the mountains, and said to the rocks and mountains and rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb, for the great day of his wrath has come, and who is able to stand? Now, if we just take their words at face value, they're saying, hey, we're dead. This is it. This is the moment. Here he is. We can see him. We've been denying him, but gee, there he is. All right. In other words, this is the time of the second coming. This is the time of the second coming. I just don't know how to make that any clearer. All right. If you guys are interested, I'd encourage you to go to douglashamp.com and look for my paper, read Revelation thematically, or why you should read Revelation thematically. Just put it in the search. You'll see it. Okay. And you can either download it or just read it on my site. I highly encourage you to read that, because if you're reading the book of Revelation in a chronological fashion, what I mean by that is, first comes all the seals, and then come the trumpet judgments. In other words, we have the seal judgments. Those are happening in real time on planet Earth. And then after all those are done, then we have another series of judgments happening on planet Earth. And then we finally have the last judgments happening on planet Earth. All right. So there's all these judgments in consecutive order, or chronological order, if you will. Whereas what we really see in the book of Revelation, and it's written thematically, right? Just as I showed you in Revelation chapter 6, at the end, we've come to the end of this whole thing. So the seals are an overview of the entire tribulation period. That's what they are, right? So I'm getting back to your question, because I know where you're going with this, but I want you to understand that by the time we get to the end of the sixth seal, guess what? This thing is over. And then the seventh seal, we have this interlude in chapter 7, right? And then we have in chapter 8, when he opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. All right. Now, this is it. This is the end of the tribulation. It's over. then starting in verse 2, we're going to get a recap. We're going to get a different series of judgments, and they are going to, in fact, you have all this stuff happening, the golden altar, and the prayers of the saints, and the angel took the censer, filled it with fire from the altar, threw it to the earth, and there were noises, thunderings, lightnings, and an earthquake. Let me show you where else we see that, because this is really huge. All right. So when the seventh angel poured out his bowl, what do we see? Noises, thunderings, lightnings, earthquake. Similar, right? Very, very, very similar, in fact. And we also see this same idea. Let's see here. It is right here. Then the temple of God in heaven was opened in heaven, and the ark of his covenant was seen. There were lightnings, noises, thunderings, and earthquake and great hail. These are all the same time period, but they're laid out in a thematic fashion. So that first we're going to get this overview of the seal judgments. Then we're going to get another overview of the trumpet judgments, which are just part and parcel of the seal judgments. And then we're going to get the exposition of the two witnesses, who are to a large degree the executors of some of these judgments, not all of them, but many of them. All right. So these are the things that we see. Okay. And notice that it says the ancient nations were angry, and your wrath has come, the time of the dead, that they should be judged, right? Because we've come to the end. This is what we're looking at, is that we're looking at it in a thematic fashion. All right. I could go on because I wrote a whole paper on this, but I won't for the sake of time. But again, I really encourage you to go and check out my paper, Why You Should Read Revelation Thematically. I think it will transform how you understand the book of Revelation. So the answer to your question is, it's the same pause. We've now come to the end. Now, exactly why it's 30 minutes, I am not sure. Why 30 minutes and not 45 minutes, or why not an hour? But that's the time that is given. So there could be some significance to half an hour. What it is, I don't know. And I'm not aware that the text tells us anywhere why it's 30 minutes. So there could be another reason that I've missed. Okay. All right. Let's go on to another question. Thank you for that, Jamie. This is from Iris. Matthew 22, parable of the wedding feast. Who are those invited but not worthy? And who are those that the servants went out into the roads and gathered both bad and good? All right. So let's take a look at the parable in Matthew 22. All right. So the kingdom of heaven is like a certain king who arranged a marriage for his son, and he sent out his servants to call those who were invited to the wedding, and they were not willing to come. All right, so let's just kind of go line by line. Who are those who were invited to the wedding but weren't willing to come? Well, this would be anybody of the nation of Israel, and I don't just mean the Jews, but I mean all Israel, who said, nope, I don't want to go. All right, and he kind of gives a little explanation here. Tell those who were invited, I prepared everything, but they made light of it. They had all these other things that they need to do. All right. And so then he sends, they, kill these servants. All right. So then he's going to send out armies to destroy their murderers and burn up their city. Then he said to his servants, the wedding is ready, but those who were invited were not worthy. All right. So this would be anybody who was in a covenant relationship with God. And again, I don't just mean the Jewish people, but I mean all Israel, including the mixed multitude out of Egypt, including people like Ruth, right? She was obviously married in, right? So you don't have to be of Hebrew blood, but you have to be now part of this commonwealth of Israel idea, okay? So they decided to exclude themselves from this feast. So now he sends out people to go and just gather everybody, right? Whoever's willing, just bring them in. Okay, now you have a man who comes in. He doesn't have a wedding garment on. Friend, how did you come in here without a wedding garment? So what is the wedding garment? The wedding garment seems to be what Jesus gives to us at the time of salvation. Now, how this guy got in, we're not sure, but he's bound hand and foot. He's cast into outer darkness where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. Now, what exactly that means, I mean, is he lost forever? Possibly. That seems to be the case. Clearly, it's not a good place. Perhaps he's cast out of the New Jerusalem, and he has to endure some time outside the New Jerusalem. That's possible. Okay. Again, I won't die on that hill. But anyway, so many are called, few are chosen. All right. So, these are the ones that were not worthy, were the ones that were part of the covenant, were in a covenant relationship with God, and they decided to remove themselves from the benefits of the covenant relationship. All right. So that would be certainly the northern kingdom of Israel. And of course, they as a whole are saved, but the individuals in that group, many of them are lost. Okay. Awesome. That's a great question. Thank you, Iris. Another question from Iris. Do you think the barn in Luke 3:17 and the rooms in Isaiah 26:20 to be the new Jerusalem that descends from heaven? Is that where we meet Jesus in the air? Yeah, Iris, that's an excellent question. I do not know where the rooms are. The barn and the rooms may entirely be the same thing, but whether those are the New Jerusalem, I would suspect no. Because as I understand it, the New Jerusalem is going to come down a little bit after Jesus returns and does all the fighting, right? So let me show you why I think that, really based on Isaiah 26. Okay, so Isaiah 26:19. Let me just do the New King James here. Okay, so we have your dead body shall live. So that's the resurrection. And then he says, come, my people, enter your chambers. Those are the rooms you're talking about. Shut your doors behind you. Hide yourself, as it were, for a little moment until the indignation, the wrath, is past. For behold, the Lord comes out of his place to punish the inhabitants of the earth for their iniquity, and the earth will also disclose their blood. Okay, so why are they hidden away? Because the Lord is coming out of his place. So when he comes out, they're going to be hidden away. This is what Paul is talking about, is that we are not appointed to wrath. Amen, I would say. Amen. We're not appointed to wrath, but it's not talking about a pre-tribulation rapture. It's talking about that when Jesus rips open the sky and he comes to fight against those who have opposed him, he's not going to fight against us because we're like, but Jesus, I like you, right? And he's not going to fight against us. He's going to fight against those who have opposed him and rejected him and want to fight, who are intentionally fighting against him. That's who he's coming, and he'll pour out his wrath on those people, on that particular group. Okay. Now, I think I've shared this a few times, but I'll of course share it again. In my opinion, all right, and I admit that I have the I have the minority opinion here, but I firmly believe that shortly after the return of Jesus, right? Remember, he comes back in flaming fire. Why is he coming back in flaming fire? Why are the elements, why is the earth melting at his return? Because there's a compatibility problem between the earth and Jesus, God. God's fire, the earth is corrupted. We are corrupted. We're decomposing, degenerate. When God came down on Mount Sinai, it was burning. So God cannot very well live on this planet for very long, and without it burning up. So according to Romans chapter 8, Paul tells us that the earnest expectation of the creation eagerly waits for the revealing of the sons of God. So creation can hardly wait until we are revealed. For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it in hope. Because the creation itself, that is the earth, the trees, the rocks, the dirt, will be delivered from the bondage of corruption into the glorious liberty of the children of God. When is that going to happen? At the revealing of the sons of God. That is when the earth is set free from the bondage. All right. So the whole idea that the earth remains corrupted during the millennium, I definitely disagree with that. And then when you start just looking at what the Hebrew Bible had to say about the age to come, about the millennium, it's very much, you have the new heavens and the new earth at the beginning of the millennium. All right. We have that in Isaiah 65, etc. Okay. So with that said, I'm forgetting your original question. One second. Let me go back. All right. So, so I would say that the New Jerusalem can come down after Jesus cleans up, puts Satan away, and all that stuff. Okay. So that's how I would reconcile that. All right. I hope that helps. Thank you, Iris. All right. Chad has a question. He says, what is the traditional celebration of Rosh Chodesh? What, if any, is the traditional celebration of the biblical New Year? All right. So Rosh Chodesh is the new month. We have we actually have something about that in 1 Samuel 20. Let me just go back. I think I have that here. I'm so close. There it is. All right. So it says here, 1 Samuel 20. All right. Verse 5. And David said to Jonathan, indeed, tomorrow is the new moon, Rosh Chodesh. Okay. And I should not fail to sit with the king to eat, but let me go that I may hide in the field until the third day at evening. All right. So just so you can see it, because it's a lot more fun when we look at it in Hebrew. Vayomer David el Yochanan, hine chodesh machar. Okay, so here, tomorrow is the moon, right? Or the month, or chodesh also is from the word chadash. Chadash means new. So this is talking about a new moon, a new month, right? And a chodesh is a month. All right, so tomorrow's the new moon, the new month. And what did they do? Well, apparently they sat down for kind of a big community meal. No, probably not everybody, but certainly the king and David was expected to be there. And because it was the new moon, this is apparently what they did. All right. Now, we're not instructed in the Bible what to do. It doesn't say what to do. We can only see what David did. And to my knowledge, that's the only reference that there is of any kind of a celebration on a new moon, which is just basically getting together for a meal. We were actually doing this some years ago at the Way congregation. It's tricky, to be fair. Everyone has very different schedules. Unfortunately, our community is very spread out. And so getting together as a community seems very challenging for the new moon. So we try to work that in at the Way. And just we have it on our calendar, just let people know, hey, it's the new moon. Since there is no specific instruction, no specific mandate that God gave, we do very little, to be honest. Now, I'm not aware of any rabbinic teaching on that. It doesn't mean there isn't. I'm just not aware of it. So there could be something more that some of the rabbinic Jews would do. So that's all I can say. All right, good. Thank you, Chad. Another question. So a couple weeks ago, my son asked about new heaven and new earth, and then if God's down here, what is in heaven? But you explained the veil good. I went over that with him, but he says he didn't answer his questions with what is still in heaven. All right, I'm going to put it really simple for Chad's son. What is in heaven? The sun, the moon, the stars, the galaxies, right? The entire universe that is just waiting to be explored. All of that is still going to be in the new heavens. Why is it new? Good question. Well, just like we have a new earth, but understand that the new earth is going to be this earth without the degeneration, without the corruption, without the decomposition. All right. So Chad, maybe you want to just share with your son that everything falls apart, right? And you can maybe share things like the house falls apart and the car is falling apart and we're falling apart, right? Everything wears out and the entire planet is wearing out. In the new planet, the new Earth, it will no longer wear out because that element, that state of degeneration will be taken away. And that will be the same for the new heavens. Now, part of the challenge may be that he thinks, well, God lives in heaven, we live down here. And yeah, scripture does speak of it that way sometimes. However, we also have just the heavens, right? We have space, the universe, that is also the heavens. So when it talks about the new heavens and the new earth, it means that everything, the heavens and earth, that's everything, right? In that time, everything is going to be made new, but nothing is going to be destroyed. Nothing goes away. So the universe that you see now is going to be the universe that you see then. The big difference is there will no longer be any degeneration, no more decomposition in that time. Okay. I hope I got it. But if not, hit me up on Shabbat and I'll see if I can make it any clearer. All right. This is from Nathan Painter. Good evening, Doug. My question tonight comes from Leviticus chapter 10 and the unauthorized fire from Nadav and Abihu. Aside from following improper procedure, wasn't the ritual of incense supposed to be Aaron's duty alone, or were there any of the priests allowed so long it was one of them? So my understanding about that, Nathan, is that all of the things that Aaron was instructed to do, his sons were also instructed to do, right? Because certainly, people get older and you got to have the next generation. So this is where it says that Aaron and his sons, such and such as a perpetual commandment or ordinance for throughout their generations, right? So it says to Aaron and his sons, right? So I don't think there was any, I don't think they broke protocol by them doing it versus their dad doing it. And you said that it seems verse 9 implies that they were intoxicated when this happened. Do you believe this to be the case, or is God simply explaining what was expected of his priests? That's a tough one. The fact that it's mentioned, don't be drinking when you do this, it could imply that. It doesn't specifically state it, right? So that's where we have to just decide, okay, were they or weren't they, or should we just leave it maybe a little bit ambiguous? I tend to just leave it a little ambiguous because the text itself is a little ambiguous. But I think you could make a fair case that they were drinking a little too much, and that may have impaired their judgment. All right. So I guess, don't priest and drive. Don't drink and priest at the same time. There we go. Something like that. So maybe that's just a good idea. Yeah. Okay. Very good. This is from Ken. The Bible mentions only one archangel. The book of Enoch says there are 7 archangels. Which one is correct? All right, Ken, it's not a contest between the two, certainly. It's true that the Bible only gives us the name of one angel, of one archangel. But think about this. The Bible also gives us only the name of 2 angels, okay? And, Satan, we'll kind of throw him in there. So maybe 2.5 or 3, okay? But as far as the good ones, we only have the names of 2 angels. So, but we clearly know that there are lots more, and we can presume that they all have a name. We're just not given those names. So the fact that the book of Enoch gives us the name of 7 archangels, I don't think that it's one or the other. We know that Michael is the archangel over the people of Israel. That would be safe to assume that there are probably other archangels out there, but the Bible does not specifically state it. But of course, in the book of Enoch, we have it in Second Temple literature. All right, this is another question from Ken. He says, the prophet Zechariah wrote in 12:10 that they will look on me whom they have pierced. Then John 19:37 says, they shall look on him whom they have pierced. Revelation 1:7, behold, he is coming with the clouds, and every eye shall see him, even those who pierced him. In Matthew 26:64, Jesus told the high priest and the council that hereafter you shall see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the power and coming on the clouds of heaven. Is Jesus indicating that those who crucified him would be resurrected at the second coming and witness his coming to set up his kingdom? So Ken, I would say that it's probably not necessarily those specific people, but it's that particular body, that group. All right. So when he was talking to the Sanhedrin, I would say that he's talking to the Sanhedrin, not to those particular individuals, but to that body. That body, that official body, will also be there at the end. And I think when he said to the scribes and Pharisees in Matthew 23, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you do all these things," he said, "You will not see my face from now until you say, Baruch haba b'shem Adonai," until you say, "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." So not those particular individuals, but that corpus will not see him until they say that. All right. And so that's how I would explain that they, meaning the corporate body, the official authorized body that rules over Jerusalem, that rules over the Jewish people, that body of people will be there to see him at his second coming. All right. Muriel says, does Colossians 1:15, the firstborn of all creation, indicate that Jesus is a created being? How does that align with John 1:2? I want to give a biblical answer to a JW who says that Jesus was created. All right. Let's go there. Let's take a look at it. Great question, Muriel. I'm not, I'm not, the question is great. It's just it takes some time to wade through it. That's all. All right, so let's get a better sense. Let's take a look here at the NLT. Jesus is the visible image of the invisible God. He existed before God made anything at all, and is supreme over all creation. All right, so you can see that they've got a little footnote there. Why do they have a footnote? Interesting. He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. Let's take a look at the NET, the New English Translation, as well. All right, he is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. What do these guys have to say? All right, so they say the Greek term prototokos, could refer either to a first in order of time, such as a firstborn child, or it could refer to one who is preeminent in rank. All right, you can look at M.J. Harris, Colossians and Philemon. Expresses the meaning of the word well. The firstborn was either the eldest child in a family or a person of preeminent rank. The use of this term to describe the Davidic king in Psalm 88:28, "I will also appoint him my firstborn, the most exalted of the kings of the earth," indicates that it can denote supremacy in rank as well as priority in time. But whether the proto element in the word denotes time, rank, or both, the significance of the tokos element as indicating birth or origin from tikto, that's from TikTok, right? No, just kidding. Give birth to has been virtually lost except in reference to literal birth. In Colossians 1:15, the emphasis is on the priority of Jesus' rank as over and above creation, and the for clause referring to Jesus as creator. All right, so I would say that Paul and John are completely in alignment here. They're not suggesting anything other. However, let me make this very, very clear. I hope I can make it very clear. All right. So here's I think the best analogy that I've ever heard of. I didn't come up with it, but I think it's really awesome. So you take the sun, all right, the sun up in the sky, S-U-N. That is the source. Think of that as the Father. And what is coming out of the sun? Well, light rays, right? Those rays of light are coming out, light and heat. Could we see the sun without the rays of light? No, we could not. It would be invisible to us. It's the light that makes visible the sun. But the rays of light are dependent. They are coming from this source called the sun, right? So I hope you can see where I'm going with this. So Jesus, he told us very clearly, he says, I'm not first, the Father is, right? He's above all things. And he is coming out of the Father. Think of it like a reflection. When you go and look at yourself in the mirror, the person in the mirror is who? Well, it's you, of course. They do everything exactly the way that you do it, right? You go up, they go up. You go down, they go down. Precisely. A perfect representation of who you are is that person in the mirror. But the person in the mirror could not exist without you. So when I look at myself in the mirror, and all right, and I go like, wow, hey guy, the guy in the mirror, he says it back to me exactly. He's the perfect representation of me, but he's not me. And if I were not where I am, then he would not be there. He's only there because I'm there, but he makes me visible. So again, I know it's an analogy, but I think it comes pretty close to explaining this relationship between God the Father and God the Son, and we can suggest that the energy coming from the Son, the heat, would be like maybe the Holy Spirit. Okay, but that's another discussion. So just understand that Jesus is making the Father visible. So if Jesus were created like the other angels, then that means there could have been no, or there could be no expression, no image of God the Father. But Jesus, rather than being created, he is perpetually generated. And there's a huge difference. And what is the word generated? Genes, right? Monogenes, the only generated or only begotten. So he is the one who is preeminently coming out from the Father and expressing the image of the Father. So he's not created, but he is dependent and he is generated. I'm putting that in quotes just to kind of get a sense here that he is generated. But just like the light rays have always been coming from the sun, so too Jesus has always been generated from the Father. Okay. I do a teaching on this. I think, okay, it's called, it's on my YouTube channel, Triunity or Trinity. Just put that in for my YouTube channel and you'll get that video. And I go into all kinds of detail on that. Okay, so check that out, Marielle. Thank you for that question. Let's get to our next one. This is from Matthew. All right, first one of our crush. All right, I'm going to keep moving. This is from Ed, speaking in Colossians 1:15, says that Yeshua is the image of the invisible God. Should we then assume that every instance in the Old Testament where man was seeing the image of God, such as Adam, Abraham, Moses, they were seeing Yeshua, otherwise God would not be invisible, as Paul states? Yeah, I think that's pretty fair to suggest that. So I'm going to say yes, okay? Especially based on the question I just answered. All right, thank you. All right, this is from Christine. Shalom, I'm sorry for the length of this. I put multiple questions here. Do you know why in Ezekiel 37:24 it says that David will reign as king, and then in the next verse, Ezekiel 37:25, it says he will be a prince? All right, let's take a look at Ezekiel 37:24 and 25. And make sure you guys can see it so that we're all on the same page. All right. So my servant David will be king over them. There will be one shepherd for all of them. They will follow my regulations and carefully observe my statutes. They will live in the land I gave to my servant Jacob, in which your fathers lived. They will live in it, they and their children and their grandchildren forever. David, my servant, will be prince over them forever. All right, so different ways to understand this, and I'm a little hard pressed, frankly, to understand. Is it talking about David the man, or is it talking about the son of David, hence Jesus? I think you can make an argument for both. All right, so, but I do believe that David the man will have a role to play, and this very well could be what that's talking about, or it could be that he's going to be a king, but then he's going to be a prince. It could be that maybe there's two understandings here. It's not easy to pin this one down, unfortunately. So I'm going to have to leave that one a little bit fuzzy. I do apologize. Let's get to verse 2. Do you know when David will be reigning again? I've heard it will be that he is reigning alongside Jesus in the millennium. Is there a scripture that says this? Well, as far as, and this is your next question, you thought all Christians were going to reign in the millennium. And I agree with you. I agree that all people who are part of the covenant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are going to be there in the millennium. That would certainly include David. And depending on how we want to understand Ezekiel 37, that would suggest that, yeah, maybe King David, the man, has a special role, a little different than other people. So, yeah, as far as there are specific scripture, well, probably Ezekiel 37 would be the place that it's actually talking about. And then you go on, you say, do you think women would also reign? My understanding is God's character is he prefers women to be in a more submissive type role. I know this request is probably too much to cover right now, but if you get a chance, would you make a timeline of how you believe events occur from the beginning of the 70th week? Yeah, that's in my book, I think, somewhere. I put it in there somewhere. Yeah, I got it in there somewhere. I know I made one. I just can't remember where it is. Will we ever get to rest in a state of eternal peace where we aren't ruling or reigning? And if we're always have still free will, is it possible that someone could sin and then starts all over again? All right, so no, it's not going to start all over again. That's the good news, Christine. All right, how do we know that? Okay, well, again, a lot of your questions I am going to answer in Corrupting the Image 4, which I have started writing, but it's on the shelf right now. Okay, so I need a little break, right? But I hope to get to that one in the next year or two. So pray that I'd have the time to get to that. All right. So, but it's a fascinating study, but it requires, since we don't have like a lot of direct scriptures to say, this is how it's going to be, we have to look at a number of different scriptures, and I have to piece those together and give you my best interpretation for these kinds of questions. And that's why they're a little trickier, and they take a lot more time to really get to the bottom of them, because sometimes they're not just, it's not stated specifically. We have to get there. Okay. So, but understand this, that in the age to come, there will be no more corruption in the very planet. There will be a time, it's at the end of the millennium, when you're either you're with Jesus, you have gotten your new body, and you can go into the New Jerusalem. Because, right, it says in Revelation 22:14, blessed are those who wash their garments or keep the commandments, that they may have the right to go into the city through the gates. But outside are the dogs and sorcerers and idolaters and all who love and practice a lie. Right? So we have a very clear distinction. And God has been giving grace all during that time that people can be saved. They have to come up to Jerusalem. They take of the river of life. They take of the tree of life, whose leaves are for the healing of the nations. But there's going to be a large group of people whose number is as the sand of the seas that decide that they don't want to serve Jesus. They don't want to be in his kingdom, even though it's really awesome. But they've decided that they don't want to do that. And so at that point, at the end of the 1,001st year, I explain all that in Millennium Chronicles, and I'm going to talk about it in Corrupting the Image 4, is that will be the deciding factor when the clock runs out, the protective barrier that they had protecting them from God's fire runs out, and God's fire comes down and consumes them. So that will be the end of those people. Now, they're gone. So everybody else who's left has done what? They have opted in to God's kingdom, right? The other people that were lost, they opted out, right? So if you've opted in, well, guess what? There's no more corruption of the planet. There's no more corruption in us. There's a crazy abundance of everything. So it's not that we don't have free will, but we have a couple things. We have experience. We know what it's like to be on the bad side, and we're like, don't want to do that again. It's kind of like, somebody who spent 30 years in jail, and then you give them an option. Do you want to go back to jail, or do you, like, I don't know, I want to be free, right? So we're not going to choose the evil again. Also understand this, that the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that negative option is no longer present. So that's the huge thing. The negative option is no longer an option. God had to put the negative option, the evil option, in the garden so that our decisions would actually have real value. But all of us, by that time, by the end of the millennium, have made our decision. We have exercised our free will. We had evil options to choose. And once Satan is done away with and all of that other stuff, then there's no longer any negative option. Okay. So if I put 10 dishes before you on a table, and they're all really great, there's no wrong option, right? There's no wrong option. But then if I put 9 dishes that are wonderful, and I put one over here that has cyanide, I'd be like, don't eat this one, right? So basically, in the millennium, that cyanide option is gone, and you have only the remaining good options to choose from. So therefore, it'll be literally impossible to choose evil because the evil potential is not there. All right. So I know it's a lot there. I'm really trying. Okay. Very good. All right, good. Let me get to the questions here in the chat now. Fantastic. Here's a question from Rob. Rob says, what are your thoughts in respect to chaos theory, chaos, and the Christian view? Okay, Rob, I have not read whatever this book or article that you are referring to. So I'm not able to answer with any kind of an intelligent sense. Okay, so I'll have to leave it there because I've not read that, so I really can't say. But I think a lot of science is cool. This may be one of them. Okay. Scott says, I really enjoyed your show with Derek, Dr. Doug. Thank you. I appreciate that so much. All right. This is from Sir Black. Hi, Doc Hamp. What is the meaning of Matthew 18:18 and how can it be applied practically? I'm really curious about this. Let's go there to Matthew 18:18. I tell you the truth, whatever you bind on earth will have been bound in heaven, and whatever you release on earth will have been released in heaven. All right, so a lot of times people get the sense that, whatever, Peter or Christian can say, I'm going to do this, and then God's like, oh, what did you say? Oh, I've got to go and then, make arrangements. But he's saying, look, what you bind on earth will have been bound in heaven. In other words, that has already been done before you do it on earth. It has already been done in heaven. All right. And whatever you release on earth will have been released in heaven. I do appreciate the New English Translation many times because they're sticklers for the accurate usage of the grammar. So we can think of it this way. We have a lot of authority. I think authority is probably a better word than power because I really don't have any power. I have zero power. God has all the power, but he's authorized me to sort of tap into his power. And when I'm walking according to his commandments, then I'm going to ask for things that are wholesome and righteous and good. And when I do that, then it's already been released. The money's already in the account, right? Before you write the check, the money's already in the account. And so that's essentially what Jesus is getting at. And I think we too often sell ourselves very short. We do not assume or expect God to really give us things. Sometimes we complain about it. Oh, God, wouldn't you please give me such and such? But really what he's saying is, look, believe that you'll receive it and you will have it. James says that, if you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, but don't doubt. Whoever doubts will not receive anything from God. So you have to ask with a mind of believing. That changes everything. And I think that is partly what Jesus is getting at here. But again, it's not just that, give me a Lamborghini, right? That is not necessarily what he's talking about. But when I'm doing things in accordance with his Torah, then I can expect good things. Okay. There's probably a lot more I could say. I would encourage you to check out what do I call it? Rethinking prayer, quantum prayer. Check those out. I have a 3-hour teaching on that if you want to go a whole lot deeper into that. Okay, this is from Chad. Is there anything in the Bible that explains what appears to be cataclysmic solar novae, burnt megalithic stones in Egypt and Peru? Yeah, not that I'm aware of. Yeah, not that I'm aware of. Sorry, Chad. Now, it does say in relation to the Exodus that that there were balls of fire that came down on Egypt. So that's certainly in Egypt. As far as Peru, I'm not aware of anything in Peru. All right. Sorry, I wish I could say more. All right, very good. This is from Jamie. Is the second coming when Jesus comes next? Yes, that is when he comes next. The second coming, that will be after the tribulation. That'll be a time where God is going to send 2 witnesses to warn the world, hey, I'm coming back. And they're going to come down with power, with all kinds of signs and wonders to authenticate their message. And then after that period, there's a really nasty period called the Great Tribulation. And Jesus comes at the end of that period. All right. Another question from Jamie. Do you accept that Daniel 7 matches up with Revelation 13 and adds to it? Yes, because they're both talking about the beast. Daniel chapter 7 is talking about this beast, that he will go and do a lot of bad things. And then we see that the beast is going to be given over to the burning flame. And then that is also mentioned in Revelation 19, I think verse 19, where he and the false prophet are then thrown alive into the lake of fire. Okay, so those are both the same thing, which is God's fire, incidentally. So, yeah, now there may be more to your question that I'm not. Maybe you had more to the question that you didn't express, and so I'd have to hear what else you have to say about that. Okay, this is from Chad. A follow-up question to previous. Could this be his wrath against ancient Nephilim builders? Chad, that one is really hard to address. I mean, I think a lot of things are possible, but not everything is provable. Okay, so is it possible? Is your question possible? Sure. Do we have proof for that? That's the real question. I'm not aware of any evidence in the Bible that is mentioning or even suggesting Peru or South America. I just don't know that. I just don't know that it says anything. It's not to say that God didn't judge those people over there. He may have, but I'm not aware of any evidence that tells us that he did that. Okay, so that, I guess I would just be cautious of trying to make a connection. And so I don't see any, but maybe you can find one. That'd be really cool. Okay, another follow-up comment question. It seems to me that one taken is left is saying the ones taken are killed at Jesus' coming. That's probably true. Well, it is also the rapture of the saints, all of the something is the resurrection. I could concur. Okay, very good. This is from Jamie. The sheep and the goats. So do likely the one saved always says as false. Okay, all right. Looks like there's some good comments there. All right, this is okay. Have you done a follow-up of corrupting the image since the jab came out? Well, I mean, I did corrupting image 2 and I did corrupting image 3. I know people have different opinions about the jab. I got it. I feel great. So if you want to get it, get it. If you don't. That's all I'm going to say about it. All right, let's go to Cody. Question in Job 22:15-16, is the flood mentioned, the flood recorded in Jasher chapter 2 of the Gihon which killed 1/3 of the population. I believe Job is antediluvian, and this flood seems to line up. Cody, I am not aware of any scholar that would suggest that Job is antediluvian. Not to say that it's impossible, but yeah. Another thing that would suggest that it's not antediluvian is in the book of Ezekiel. God is talking about 3 righteous men who would be the only people that would escape, and he says Noah, Job, and Daniel. So the fact that he mentions Noah, then Job, would suggest that Job came after Noah, and since only 8 people got out on the boat, and obviously Job was righteous, that means that he didn't, he didn't make it. So I don't know. That seems a little bit of a lot of a stretch, actually. So, but let's take a look at the text. That's a great place to start. So Job 22:15. Job 22:15. Hold on, see if I can type here. All right. Will you keep the old path that evil men have walked, men who were carried off before their time when the flood was poured out on their foundations? Yeah, I mean, I would presume that this is talking about the flood of Noah. The ancient world actually had a lot of just understanding that a flood happened. Like they took it as a matter of fact, right? I talk about that in Corrupt the Image too. And I show the source where, they're like, people lived a long time before the flood. And they just say it as if like, well, everybody knows about the flood, right? Like, we all know about Pearl Harbor, right? It's just like you say Pearl Harbor, you're like, oh, I know what you're talking about. When you say the flood, everyone knew what you're talking about. So the way I would read Job 22:15 is that this is happening after the flood, but it's referencing the flood as if it's just a well-known fact. Okay. All right. Another question from Jamie. Righteousness by faith, imputed or imparted? The one thrown out is down. Well, I think righteousness is lived out. I don't know that it's either imputed or imparted. I mean, I know the whole discussion that Jesus, his righteousness was imputed to us on the cross. I get that. We are saved by grace, but we're also told to live out our righteousness. And Jesus doesn't do righteousness for us. He's forgiven us based on his righteousness. I don't know. I just have trouble with the whole, his righteousness is imputed to me. Because then what happens is it turns into this doctrine that, it's like Jesus takes a bucket of paint of righteousness and just pours it over you. And he can't see all the nasty things you do. But clearly he can. I mean, he talks about it so many times throughout the Gospels, throughout the book of Revelation. He sees our actions. So I don't know. It just makes for a really weird doctrine when it's taken too far. I get the basic idea, but I think it can be taken really way too far. So the one who lives righteously is righteous, right? I mean, that's what it says in Ezekiel. Paul in Romans chapter 2, right? The one who does righteously, the one who does the Torah, that's the person who's saved, not the person who just hears about it. So I don't know. Okay. All right. Let's get to another question. In the parable of the wheat and tares in Matthew 13, it says, while men slept, the enemy sowed bad seeds. Who are the men who slept? Well, again, it is a parable. So I don't know that we could say, well, this group is particularly sleeping, but I think the people who are sleeping are the good people who love the Lord. And the bad group in this parable is the devil, right? So while people were not expecting it, while they were not looking, the devil was doing his bad stuff. Okay. All right. Thanks, Cece. Okay. Some prayers. Good. This is from Cody. Is Amos 3:12 speaking of a future event during the second Exodus? Would this be during the day of the Lord? Let's take a look at Amos 3:12. All right. This is what the Lord says. Just as a shepherd salvages from the lion's mouth a couple of leg bones or a piece of an ear, so the Israelites who live in Samaria will be salvaged. They will be left with just a corner of a bed and a part of a couch. Oh, yeah, that one's tricky. I wouldn't, I don't know. I know a lot of people are well, the whole second Exodus discussion, it's a little, I don't know, a little complicated. So I don't have time for that right now. I do apologize, but I don't know. I'm not convinced that Amos 3:12 was talking about the time of the Lord. So, all right. Guys, I see there's a few more questions. We are really out of time. I just want to see if there's anybody, if there's another easy question here. Here's CZ. Nephilim might have built the pyramids, right? Well, maybe. I mean, we don't know. We don't know. That's part of the problem. All right. And the last question, don't write anymore. Is Psalm 91:12 the so-called rapture, when we are protected, Passover, when he destroys the earth with fire, the day of the Lord destruction, Psalm 91 speaking of second Exodus language? Well, let's take a look at Psalm 91:12. Psalm 91:12. They will lift you up in their hands so that you will not slip and fall on a stone. You will subdue a lion and a snake. You will trample underfoot a lion and a serpent. Yeah, I don't really think you can get the second Exodus out of that. Obviously, this is what Jesus, this is what Satan used against Jesus. This is very much a messianic psalm. So, I mean, unless we want to go for, multiple interpretations, which is possible, but I deal with that a lot in Corrupt the Image Volume 2. I go into a lot of detail about that particular passage. Too much to talk about on the show, but there's some really cool linguistic things there. You actually see the word peten, which is a cobra, which is the same as the word Bashan. They're the same word, same root. Bashan is a snake dragon, which is referring to Satan as the god of death. So very good. All right. Thank you, guys. Great questions, man. Some of them are just fantastic. I do appreciate you guys showing up. Thank you for the good comments. Yeah, I see Trevor. Thanks for appearing in Age of Deceit. That was a lot of fun. I'm glad that it had some good impact on you, Trevor. Join us next week. Remember, you can put your questions in the app, and that way you get it in early. So the Way Congregation app, you can get that at the Apple or Google stores, and the Way Congregation, and then you can put your question in. So I will see you guys next week. Join us tomorrow for the virtual Midrash, and I think we're going to have everything on Thursday, though. Do pray for Scott. He had a family, tragedy. So just keep him in prayer for that. Okay. God bless you guys. Take care.